All right, so Yosh, we wanted to talk to you about pricing and packaging because, having been part of the early inception of the subscription economy, you guys had to price and package your software, and everybody goes through this. Can you kind of walk us through thinking behind that process and how you find the kind of equilibrium of price performance?
Pricing and packaging is, I think, so important to a business. I think you have to think through that from the very kind of inception, early phases company, but you also have to constantly measure and monitor for that. And you have to collect feedback from your customers. And I think the aspects of what you need to look at first are like, okay, what is the unit of measurement by which you can charge for your product? And is it on a per user basis? Is
Yep.
it on some usage metric, whether it, based on call it VMs or CPUs, or whether it's based on some sort of cloud infrastructure kind of unit? In AI, it might be kind of, words or tokens.
Yeah.
And then you have to kind of look at what are customers willing to pay for it, and how can you get customers to kind of onboard in a very seamless way. It really doesn't break the bank initially. How do you get them on
Yeah.
board to be able to use your product? And then over time, they should hopefully be able to pay for value, and they're willing to pay for value because your product is useful. So I think that's, you have to think about that aspect. The second aspect that you need to think about when it comes to pricing and packaging is how much is it costing you to run the service? And you need to make sure that you're thinking about the margins and the uplift, because ultimately you have to grow into being a healthy company. So your gross margins are impacted if you don't price package your service in the right way. So you need to understand all of those costs underneath that, from your infrastructure, if you're using AI, the token spend, all the different other kind of soft components that go into servicing the product. And then you have to also look at the people costs. How do you have to service it in terms of the people around support and kind of onboarding experiences and just the ongoing kind of success, someone's usage of the product.
Yep.
So there's a lot of different ways to do pricing and packaging. You could do mixed and blended models, but ultimately I think where I see pricing and packaging going is moving to this notion where it's less reliant on users, because if you can have a data moat and base it on data, you don't get into the problem that I think a lot of companies are going to have is, as companies are downsizing the number of employees, and if your price based on users, you're probably going to have a lot of churn. So if you can figure out a way to come up with a model that doesn't force user-based pricing, you could still tie it to number of users, your product to number of users, because you authenticate and give them login access. But I think there's going to be a step function in terms of how companies think about how they price and package, given that this notion of user-based pricing, I think is kind of fading away a bit.
What do you think it's going to be replaced by, like usage-based instead of user-based?
I think usage-based, value-based,
Yeah.
you can meter and monitor all this usage and behavioral stuff around the application. And I mean, Elasticsearch, it wasn't based on users, right? It was, based on data and ingest. And you see this with, companies like Grafana and Datadog. And you see this already happening in kind of the data and infrastructure space. And when you imagine like a cybersecurity company today, do you really need to price it based on user? Because at the end of the day, in order to prevent and thwart these attacks, it's a data game.
Right.
You're ingesting as much data as possible in order to do this correlation to define kind of either known vulnerabilities or attack vectors. So probably
That's
don't
right.
even need kind of, per user. Now, in the sales and marketing of the GTM space, things were priced based on users for a reason. But I think there are creative ways to get around that, where you don't have to hold a company accountable to say like, oh, you have 100 reps, so it's going to be charged, $100 per rep, and that's it.
Yeah.
I think it's you can have this mixed blended model.